Hello, science enjoying people. We are here without a Blair. Hopefully, she will be able to join us. Her
Blairless.
internet is suffering a local outage in
Hmm.
her local area. So, unfortunately, we are still minus a Blair, even though she was going to be here tonight. I know you're out there, Blair. I know you're there. Hopefully,
And
hopefully she can join us.
I will just telegraph ahead of time. Didn't get a full night's sleep ahead of the show because it's 5 o'clock in the morning here where I'm at, and didn't really get much sleep last night. That my building was on fire, and I'll talk about that maybe in the after show. But
We'll talk about that.
Denmark
Yeah.
needs to learn about fire safety. I get it. You have a big affinity for candles in this country. And it's normally wet everywhere. So even if you do put up
Normally
like
not a big deal,
commercial
right?
grade fireworks in your backyard, nothing catches on fire because everything's wet or made out of concrete. But seriously, people.
Yeah.
Basic fire safety.
Basic. No, don't burn down the house, everyone. Let's just have a science program. How does that sound? So, this is the weekly broadcast of the This Week in Science podcast, and we are going to talk about science for the next 90 minutes or so. And what else happens? Yes, we're going to do the show. Everything live is live. It's not recorded, pre-recorded, or anything of that sort. It's happening as you're watching it, except if you're watching it later. But we're not editing that. We only edit the podcast because if there's blurps and bleeps and blurs, then we might want to get rid of those. I don't know. Or we might want to highlight them and make them special. But mainly the podcast gets edited and this is live. So
what Kiki's trying to say, if I may mansplain for a moment,
is
that if you watch this version and you're like, hey, they don't seem as polished or as professional as the other podcasts I listen to on the YouTube, it's because this is live, unedited, raw, no second takes, working without a wire.
No take backs.
You can take that criticism and you can place it anywhere you like on the internet. That's your right.
Place it actually just give us lots of love. Hit all the love buttons.
Hit the likes,
thumbs ups and love buttons and notifications and subscribe.
What does the bell do?
The bell, it signs you up to be notified whenever we're going live.
So if somebody has hit the bell previously, right now it would be like putting an alarm on their computer to watch the YouTube show.
Yeah. Well, it might just be like boop boop, and there's like a little notification.
Yeah, I don't know if I noticed that though. They should turn up the volume on it next time, and then if I get more people watching the show,
make it like the bells in the churches across the street from the places I stayed in France this summer. Oh my gosh. Seriously, in France, pretty much everywhere I stayed, there was a church across the street that decided to ring its bells very loudly every hour.
Yeah.
All
hey, we have watches now. People can
what?
tell time. They got watches. They got it on their phones.
No, but you got church bells. But you got
there's a clock on my oven. You know, I don't need the bells anymore.
Schnago says every time you click the bell, a UX designer dies. Oh no, we want people to be notified. All right, let's do a show. I've been putting it off because I was hoping Blair would suddenly appear like a magical science fairy and start joining us for the show, but it hasn't happened yet, and we don't want to keep everyone waiting. And she said she needed to be done with the show by 10, so that means we need to get our show underway so that everything stays within the time, with the optimism that Blair will be joining us because her internet outage is going to go away. Comcast. Okay, let's start this show. You ready?
Yeah.
We are ready. Ready for some science. In a hole. 3, 2. This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 893, recorded on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. Oh, I was going to do another pun and I didn't write it down. I was going to make the title of the show more punny and be like, it's autumn about time. It's autumn.
What?
It's
It's a good
autumn
thing you
about
didn't.
time.
It's a
You
good
should
thing
be
you didn't.
falling in love with science.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, no, it's really bad. So, title of the show. Sorry for that edit, Rachel.
You know, there's something about about a bad misremembered pun that is actually funnier than the what the pun would have been itself. I do appreciate I had a terrible pun.
It's
Anyway.
terrible. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry,
it's
not
fantastic.
sorry. Okay. September 21st, 2022. Falling in love with science. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with anxiety, ants, and ancient opium. But first,
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Most of what humanity does on a daily basis is nothing new. The trash will be picked up, the roadways, sidewalks, and transit stations will fill up and empty out again. Workers will put in a day's work. Papers will be filed, potholes filled, information will flow, and transactions of all sorts will take place. Guests will be welcomed, food prepared, and conversations will fill the air. The daily chores will be checked off, mostly. Parents will put their little ones to bed, students will study, people will sit down to watch the latest version of ancient story archetypes, this time with robots or dragons, or in space with robot dragons. And everywhere around the world, another day will pass, as so many have passed before. We live in a world of our own making, one of order, routine, and safety, where we can maintain it, and we repeat ourselves in conversations, in activities, and in mistakes, doing so much of the same things over and over again that even now just talking about it becomes redundant. There is one thing we do that, while routine in its execution, can lead us down paths we have not traveled before. Science. Science is the one avenue of human activity that makes new discoveries, where the call of the explorer to seek the unknown adventure is still being met by the pioneers of research. And every day brings something new. You might even say there's always something new under the sun, or that the more things change, the more they get talked about here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
and a good science to you too, Justin. And we're still missing a Blair. She is having internet issues. Hopefully, she will join us at some point during the show. And hello to everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. Oh, yeah, we are here. You ready?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
You've got science.
I
got it.
have got all sorts of science-ish stories.
All right, good. I have a few as well. Let's see. What have I lined up? I've got not very Nobel prizes, NASA news, frogs and mosquitoes, and editing RNA. What did you bring?
Let's see. What have I got? I've got so much anxiety.
No.
Yeah. I've got so many ants. And I've got not enough microbial nomenclature to go around, as well as a decent supply of ancient opium.
Well, someone's having, I guess the opium balances out the anxiety, maybe. So
Everything's
anyway,
going to be fine.
It's going to be fine. Everything works out
Everything
in
is
the
under
end.
control.
It's hunky dory. And everything on this show is going to be talked about with respect to science. Science, the process, the wonderful tool in our tool belt for exploring the universe and the knowledge it brings. You can find out about all this science that we talk about every single week. If you're not yet subscribed, you can mash that subscribe button on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook. I don't know. I'm going saying what the youngs say. You subscribe. Subscribe. We're also on a podcast thing, all the podcast things. We do that. You can find us on the podcaster thingies. Look for This Week in Science, wherever great podcasts are found, because that's only where This Week in Science is found.
And
We're
at some point, we
also
pointed out, somewhere place else we point out that we have a website,
that's what
which
I
is
was
also
going.
which is very important because we have links to the stories that we talk about there. So
Yes.
instead of just hearing somebody saying something that about a science thing that they probably made up, oh, I've heard about this research into
No, we
this
have
thing that
source
said that
material.
I'm right about stuff. All of the sources of the information that we talk about, the studies that have been published, there's links to them, or at least the press releases in some cases, at our website where you can go and find the press release or and then therefore the actual study,
Right.
so that you can go and look at it yourself.
Right. But we're also on the social media. Twitter, Instagram. We are TWIS Science. Everywhere else, just look for This Week in Science. Our website is twis.org. And on those streaming channels that I asked you to subscribe on, we do stream every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time ish. We're there. We're there. We're here right now. And now it's time for the science. You know what time of year it is, Justin?
This is the autumn pun. Did you remember it?
You autumn be falling in love with science. Sorry. I can't help myself sometimes. No, this is not the autumn pun, but that was a very unnoble, in fact, ignoble
Oh, it's
kind
the
of
Ig
pun.
Nobles. Oh, those are my
Yeah.
favorites. Yeah.
It is the Ig Nobel award season. The Ig Nobel Prize is announced. Several of them are handed out for different categories every year. And it is all in the name of pointing out the fun in science, bringing a smile to people's faces where science is involved. And this last week on the 15th of September, the 32nd first annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony was held, and the winners are as follows. For applied cardiology, a team out of the Czech Republic, Netherlands, UK, Sweden, and Aruba won an award for seeking and finding evidence that when new romantic partners meet for the first time and feel attracted to each other, their heart rates synchronize.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like all those songs, two hearts that beat as one. They're
Well,
all accurate. They're right.
yeah.
If you're falling in love for the first time, you're synchronizing.
So does that mean that people fall in love easier if they have the same body mass? Because I feel like for
No.
some people, like having
No.
your heart rate meet that of a person with a very different
Physiology, it's a
constitution might-
crazy thing. Exactly. The Literature Prize was for a group of researchers, Canada, USA, UK, and Australia, for analyzing what makes legal documents unnecessarily difficult to understand. And you want to know what it is?
The words?
Poor writing.
Yeah.
Poor writing, not specialized concepts, drive processing difficulty in legal language. That's the name of the paper. Biology goes to a collaboration out of Brazil and Colombia for studying whether and how constipation affects the mating prospects of scorpions. First, I had no idea that scorpions could suffer from constipation. Second, female scorpions apparently suffer from constipation after their tails have been cut off. And yes, it does impact reproduction and mating prospects for the males because the females are not feeling very good. Science, everyone, science. And if you're interested in the title of this paper, Fitness Implications of Non-Lethal Injuries in Scorpions, females, but not males, pay reproductive costs. Medicine goes to Poland for showing that when patients undergo some kinds of toxic chemotherapy, they suffer fewer harmful side effects if ice cream is involved. It's true. Ice cream used as cryotherapy reduces oral mucositis. So it can be ice cream. That's great. I mean, I hope doctors start prescribing that. All right, engineering goes to Japan for trying to discover the most efficient way for people to use their fingers when turning a knob.
Wait, say that again?
Rotary control. The reference is how to use fingers during rotary control of columnar knobs. Yeah. Art history is very interesting. This is definitely
Wait, so are there people? Hang on, I gotta pause for a sec. Is there like a condition? Are there people who are just like, I can't do rotary knob devices. It's just rare condition. If a door has one of those things, but if I have to turn like a handle, I don't know how. I can't fit my fingers. Just
we need to be efficient. Efficiency. I mean, you need better efficiency. Let's try and design those columnar knobs so that they are easier for the fingers to handle.
Well,
okay, I need to stop talking about that now and move on to anthropology. Art history goes to a study entitled A Multidisciplinary Approach to Ritual Enema Scenes on Ancient Maya Pottery.
So that I learned something new right there.
Ancient Maya pottery.
Ancient enemas.
Yep, we have learned something new. This is what the show is all about. Physics was awarded jointly to two groups, China, UK, Turkey, USA. And this is for a study we actually talked about on this program related to how ducklings manage to swim in formation and to conserve energy by riding each other's waves. They do wake riding and wave passing. And let's see, the economics prize is for Italians for explaining mathematically why success most often goes to not to the most talented people, but instead to the luckiest. And for finally safety
somebody got
engineering.
passed over for a promotion who came up with that study.
The safety engineering prize surprisingly goes to Sweden for developing a moose crash test dummy.
They give them driver's licenses. This is another thing. I don't talk about it because I'm down here.
You give the mooses driver's license?
Yes, I'm down here in Denmark, so it's not a big deal here because they're not allowed to be licensed here. But in Sweden, a moose can get a driver's license, and they're terrible drivers. So I'm glad at least they've improved.
Because, I mean, if you're trying to drive with those antlers sticking out of the car windows, I guess that makes sense. Welcome, Blair. You have joined us. Let's hope that your internet...
Hey.
your internet holds up. That would be fantastic. But those are the Ig Nobel Prizes. We have learned some, we have laughed some, and we look forward to more of these next year. But you know what this means? The Nobels are coming up. So get ready for some big awards to be awarded in the
What are you going to wear to the Nobels this year, Kiki?
Probably a blanket and slippers.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Because of the time difference.
Yeah.
Justin, you could go to the ceremonies. You're in the right time zone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It'd be close. Okay, Justin. It's your turn to tell a story.
Oh, gosh. What was I going to start with?
Are you feeling anxious about it?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. Researchers in Linköping, messing that up, University of Sweden, have discovered a biological mechanism that increases the strength with which fear memories are stored in the brain. So fear, if you're not familiar, is an essential part of avoiding death in most living things, escaping life-threatening situations, as well as learning to avoid them in the future. Your heart rate goes up, adrenaline maybe is kicking in, getting ready for that fight or flight response. And classically, we have a zebra that is calmly grazing on the savannah. Suddenly there's a lion and it chases after the zebra. The zebra runs because the fear response kicks in. So it's giving it all. It's all to get away from this lion. And it does. It escapes. Yay! Heart rate returns to normal. Zebra goes back to grazing on the savannah eventually. Maybe a little twitchy-eared at first, but it just calms down and goes back to eating. In some conditions that affect humans, like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety-related disorders, those fear reactions are excessive and persistent even when the threat of danger is gone. Intense anxiety, even though the danger is no longer present, this is kind of what is being experienced in PTSD and a lot of anxiety disorders. So this is, in this case, the zebra has escaped the lion, but then can't calm down afterwards. Can't eat, can't sleep. It affects their relationships with other zebras, and they turn to excessive alcohol use to help alleviate their symptoms. Study that was published in Molecular Psychiatry. It was on rats. It's providing new knowledge on the mechanism behind anxiety-related disorders, and also to identify perhaps a shared mechanism between anxiety disorders and those who get anxiety disorders and those who have higher rates of alcohol dependence. Researchers suspected that certain individuals have greater tendency to develop pathological fears, and this is caused by the way that their brains process the fear memories. So some areas of the brain are more important for processing fear-related memories than others. The amygdala is activated when threats are experienced and works together with parts of the frontal brain lobes, which is the prefrontal cortex, which are very important for processing, regulating, I suppose, emotions. And we've sort of discussed this in the past, that it's a bit of a one-way connection. So the amygdala can fuel the prefrontal cortex with all sorts of emotional fuel and fear. And it's like, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. But the prefrontal cortex has a hard time telling the amygdala, enough, I got it. Okay, I heard you. Shh, because the amygdala can't really hear. It's like bad hearing or something. It's not really built to hear and get information in. It's really built to put information out. So when the amygdala gets stuck sending fear, fear, fear to the prefrontal cortex, that's part of the mechanisms behind these stress disorders.
Why isn't the prefrontal cortex bossier? This is what I want to know. We need a bossy prefrontal cortex.
And apparently it does try, because it actually has to play. Like, this is the cartoon in my head. We should have an expert talk about this. The cartoon picture in my head is it has to play a game of telephone with other parts of the brain to get back to the amygdala, because it can't just tell it directly. It has to exactly. Call a friend who has to call a friend who has to call a friend back to the amygdala, who's hard of hearing to begin with, and just keeps on, doesn't care. According to Estelle Barbier, assistant professor of the Center for Social and Affective Neuroscience at Linköping University, who led the study, we know that the network of nerve cells that connects the frontal lobes to the amygdala is involved in fear responses. The connections between these brain structures are altered in people with PTSD and other anxiety disorders. The investigation led them to a protein known as PRDM2, an epigenetic enzyme that suppresses the expression of many genes. So that's kind of interesting already. It's an epigenetic enzyme, so it's not something that's hard-boiled into the genomic code necessarily, but it's something that is an alteration that is producing this protein. They previously found that levels of this PRDM2 are lower in folks that have alcohol dependence, And it is very common for alcohol dependence and anxiety-related conditions to be present at the same time. So they decided, hey, this is what we're investigating. We're going to see if there's a link here and how this is operating. So in order for new memories to last, they must be stabilized and preserved as long-term memories in the process known as consolidation. Researchers in the current study investigated the effects of reduced levels of PRDM2 on the way fear memories are processed. And according to Barbier, we have identified a mechanism in which increased activity in the network between the frontal lobes and the amygdala increases learned fear reactions. We show that downregulation of PRDM2 increases the consolidation of fear-related memories. So it seems to allow more amygdala fear messaging to get stored for the longer term.
Right. It doesn't allow the prefrontal cortex to have as much input to erase some of that fear.
Yes. I got the message right. I don't need to put this on the, it's sort of like if, oh gosh, nobody's going to remember this. A long time ago when you wanted to watch a movie, you had to buy it at a store, take it home, maybe put it on a shelf. But it's like if all of the movies that you had on that shelf were Scream 2, right? I don't know if that's maybe just the first one.
I would like.
I don't think those are scary.
That was mine. I don't know. I don't watch scary movies because I don't like them. All right. So the researchers also identified other genes that were affected when the level of PRDM2 was reduced. Genes which resulted in an increase in the activity of nerve cells that connect with the frontal lobe and the amygdala. So it's not just that it's not erasing; it's also getting more messages in, because it's also allowing more connection. So it says, in conclusion, patients with anxiety disorders may benefit from treatments that weaken or erase fear memories. The biological mechanism we have identified involves the downregulation of PRDM2. That's what's causing this, or associated with the cause of this. And we currently do not have any way of increasing it. So there's not a cure, but that means if it's identified, maybe there is drug targets and that sort of thing that can take place. This mechanism may be part of the explanation why some individuals have a greater vulnerability to developing anxiety-related conditions. It may also explain why these conditions and alcohol dependence so often are present together, according to Barbier.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because I have heard of the two going hand in hand for a while. It's been a known combination of factors, but the question is, what exactly has been going on to make it happen? Why does it lead to it? So it's really interesting to start figuring out what's involved in allowing the fear conditioning to set in more, to allow the anxiety to become potentially overbearing. And if you can't treat the alcohol dependence, then it potentially does give other targets that we can work on to help people at least maintain combat the anxiety. Because sometimes I think there may be a feedback effect between people not wanting to be anxious, and so they drink more to not be anxious, and then it just cycles and cycles and cycles. And so if you can break the cycle somehow, it could end up helping to treat alcohol dependence.
Yeah, and there's also something that's sort of interesting that we've talked about before with students who study and then and then take a test the next day, and then students who study, then drink, then take a test the next day. It's actually the drinkers that do better the next day, and partly it's because they think they are limiting the amount of new information that's coming in.
I thought it was just that if they drank while they studied and then they drank
while
they took the test, then they did better.
No, it's not while they studied. It was after they studied. So presumably,
it was after.
Maybe this was another study that I'm remembering, because there was a whole thing about if you had a condition while you were studying and you had that same condition when you took the test, then that also helps. Yeah. So yes, this is a separate one.
This one was about basically more about how memories get formed, and alcohol sort of interrupts. They think what the idea was that it interrupts a lot of new memories being formed. So what you learned before that is all the brain has to work with. And so that's why it gets locked in better, because it's not competing with other information through the rest of the day. So the thing that was sort of interesting about this occurred is that to me is that alcohol. If the people who are consuming a lot of alcohol, as maybe as a stress relief, may also be allowing those fear memories to lock in greater because there's less competition because their drinking times are not allowing as much memory formation. So then it becomes a really vicious circle of accelerating anxiety as opposed to while attacking the symptoms. Either way you look at it, this study is great because there's two targets, PTSD and anxiety, that are huge, and there could be alcohol dependence if there is a drug target or a solution that can be found to upregulate this one epigenetic gene in certain people.
Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. Hey, Blair, you want to talk about screen time?
Yeah.
Something? Screen time, maybe?
Yeah, so this is a case of ... in rats.
Hey, that was my last
one. But this is a study indicating that potentially exposure to blue light via regular use of tablets and smartphones may alter hormone levels and increase the risk of early puberty. This was a study on female rats divided into 3 groups of 6, so also a very small sample size, and exposed to either a normal light cycle, 6 hours, or 12 hours of blue light. So the 6 and 12 hours of blue light groups found puberty occurred significantly earlier than those exposed to normal light. And the longer the duration of exposure, the earlier the onset of puberty. Yes, they also found reduced levels of melatonin, increased levels of reproductive hormones, and physical changes in the ovaries. Previous blue light studies have shown that it can be linked to disrupted sleeping patterns, as we know. There's even an interesting study about wildlife and blue light out this week, but I couldn't bring you everything. And so
I think the main result of that was that it's affecting bird migration and it's affecting
there was that one.
Animals.
There was also one about wallabies. So
wallabies.
There was lots of blue light in the news this week, but ultimately we know that blue light can impact hormones in your body. We know that it can impact your circadian rhythms. We know it can impact all sorts of different systems. And so now it's looking like blue light can also impact the onset of puberty. They do think, again, this is ... in rats, but they think that there might be a correlation between that and the fact that in recent years, there have been studies that have reported increases in early puberty onset for girls, and particularly during the pandemic. They think there is a potential link because people were on their devices way more during the pandemic. And so that could have impacted this increase in early puberty. Very difficult to assess in human children. Lots of variables that you can't remove from the equation. Very difficult to figure out what's going on. But I don't think this is a totally bonkers study because of the previous studies on blue light and hormones that we have seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that take home that, okay, we can't just completely take this and say, humans, stay off of your devices but because we do know that there are these impacts, like you said, circadian rhythms then do affect hormone production. And so it can have these cascading effects. This is something that we should be looking at and be considering very carefully. It's what it's going to turn into, though, is like whether or not people are giving their kids carob or chocolate, whether or not they're giving their kids sugar, or whether they're keeping their kids away from products that have aspartame, or
are they consuming a bunch of caffeine?
This is going to sit within that body of public choices that have to do with lifestyle, and some people are going to be aware of these things, some people are not, and it's really interesting as we learn more, and it'll be interesting to see how the information is adopted in terms of public health and what messaging our public health bodies really end up sharing, right? But
Yeah, well, and also I'm just now thinking about the fact that, okay, so we have an okay amount of research on puberty timing in women.
Yes. Which
but-
has been the age has been getting lower and lower and
Right.
lower for a very long time before cell phones became popular even.
I'm just kind of curious how that was measured before.
Right.
If
What's
it was
the difference
skewed
now?
data,
Yeah.
because also women's health has always been a very weird, like, it's been tough to figure out how to collect that information without infringing on things. I don't know. It just seems like we can't actually have that reliable longitudinal data on this. I don't know.
I don't know. And does the fact that school systems were closed impact that longitudinal data, and how? Like, is there, we know there were impacts on kids going into their doctors. We know there are impacts on kids going in to get vaccines. We know there are impacts on those regular checkups. And then also because schools were out, there also were not kind of those touchstones that kids would normally have for, 2 years at least. So does that gap impact what we're seeing and the data that they're reporting on? That's
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I also just wonder if, like, 50, 60, 70 years ago, do we have reliable data on when people entered puberty?
That is a great question, because I wonder about that. Just knowing generally the way that research into women's health
Yes, that's what I'm
is
saying,
gone.
right?
Yeah.
Like, were women in the 50s really calling their doctor when they got their period for the first time? I don't know if they were. And I don't know if they could reliably say, I started my period when I was blank. And is that information going into a database anywhere, right?
I don't know if it's going into a database. I'm sure it's in a lot of diaries and journals.
Right, but how does that help you with longitudinal data on the normal timing of onset of puberty in women? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as an interesting kind of addition to this question of, is it really earlier? Is it significantly earlier? I don't know. I'm just asking. But regardless, watch your children's use of blue light. And also there's the whole question of, does it impact male rats? Because they weren't in the study. So maybe a question for next time.
There's more questions. There are always more questions when it comes to research like this. I just hope that people continue following up.
Yes.
Now, things that we are going to continue following up on, always the NASA news. This week, some really fun stories, gorgeous pictures coming out from James Webb's Space Telescope from NASA. The new view, looking close in at Neptune, has given us the really beautiful pictures of the Neptunian ring system. You know, Neptune has rings, right? Neptune has rings. We don't talk about Neptune's rings because, Saturn is the ringy showstopper. But Neptune has rings. It has a bunch of moons and rings. And this is the first time that we have looked at the rings of Neptune in about 30 years, which is pretty exciting in itself. So we're able to look at Neptune in the infrared, whereas Hubble has looked previously in the visible light spectrum. And so now they're able to compare what we could see through the beautiful visible light, thanks to Hubble, to this infrared information, which is giving us a lot of knowledge about the gas that's there, the energy that's being released in terms of heat, how hot are the clouds, what's going on in the atmosphere of this gas giant. The methane, so when you think of Neptune, what color do you normally think?
Blue.
Blue. It's not blue. It's like white. Yeah, so James Webb,
one of those what do they call them? The mobiles. Where they got all the hanging plants. They always this big blue thing. It's always Neptune.
Yeah, because Neptune's the god of the ocean.
Yeah, and that's why they named Neptune because it's blue, right? But it's not
because
blue.
Visibly that's what the methane gas would be absorbing and putting out. But no, no. To JWST, it does not. It looks more white in the infrared. And in case,
but that's not even anyway.
Anyway, there are also bright streaks, which are methane ice clouds and spots, and they reflect sunlight before it gets absorbed by methane gas. So there are clouds and made of methane ice, which is fascinating to me. There's a thin circle of brightness that circles the planet's equator, and the researchers think it could be global atmospheric circulation that powers winds and storms in the atmosphere of Neptune. The atmosphere actually gets warmer toward the equator, and it has when you think warm, it's not nice and toasty warm. This is still a very cold gas giant. It has a 164-year orbit. Its north pole is out of view for astronomers, but there's a very bright spot, a glowiness that James Webb has been able to see that suggests that there might be more of these icy clouds up near the northern pole or something else going on in the atmosphere. Anyway, there's a lot of really fascinating aspects. They're also able to look at the rings and the moons, and Triton, they say, is covered in a frozen sheet of condensed nitrogen, reflecting an average of about 70% of the sunlight that hits it. And this is actually brighter than Neptune itself because Neptune likes to absorb the sunlight because of its methane atmosphere. Okay, Triton also.
Doesn't that...
What?
Well, doesn't that just mean that the James Webb needs to color correct? I mean, because the infrared doesn't see the white or blue or any of that. It's a whole different spectrum that they have to shift down into.
Yeah, they could make it blue probably if they wanted to. This is the wavelength. These are the near infrared wavelengths that they're color coding.
Neptune could actually be blue to at least, because we're just basing it on human eye anyway. I mean, not the Blairs, not all humans.
No, but, not much.
Most humans would still see it as blue, right?
Anyway, moving on from Neptune, which I guess they also believe that Triton may have been a captured Kuiper belt object because Neptune is so far out there and large enough to have that kind of a gravitational pull. Very interesting side note. Now, moving on from James Webb, we also have old NASA missions, the Cassini mission out to Saturn. Speaking of
rings.
Of rings, exactly. Mm-hmm. And this old mission to Saturn with Cassini has discovered that the phosphorus that is involved in the ocean underneath the icy crust of Enceladus, the Enceladus is moon of Saturn. It's got an icy crust, and inside of this icy crust, it has what they think of as kind of like a carbonate ocean. They're calling it a soda ocean, which I think is very fun. It's like soda pop, but not really. It's kind of, though, because based on their new analysis of the chemical processes that might be happening within this ocean under the ice on this moon of Saturn, it could be leading to lots of phosphorus being taken up from the rocky core and the minerals that are there and being made soluble into this soda. And so it's like a phosphate ocean, phosphates. They were sodas that you used to go and get at the soda stand. I'd like my cherry phosphate, please. Yeah. So Enceladus's moon is now our solar system soda shop. But what this really means is that with the phosphorus in the liquid, in the way that it is, this ocean is potentially even more habitable. for life. Could be. Could be. We don't know for sure. We still have to go there, which people would like to do. And maybe this is more evidence which will get us there faster. Finally, NASA news. Speaking of things that NASA is just going out there to go do, the DART tests. DART is happening Monday. This coming Monday. So as of our next episode, we will be able to report on the DART mission to go and tap on an asteroid. It's heading out to the binary asteroid Didymus, and the Didymus Reconnaissance and Asteroid Camera for Optical Navigation, or DRACO, has snapped all sorts of pictures of stars, and they've lined up this mission. And Draco's going to keep looking at Didymus and Dimorphos, which are this binary system, these two asteroids, and DART is going to just jump all in there and impact using its smart nav system to get in there and boop an asteroid and try and set it off course.
Yeah.
But it's not this is one that's coming toward our planet. Being as it's a binary system, Dimorphos is a little moon asteroid of Didymus, and so it'll go boop Dimorphos and then see whether or not it can change the orbit of Dimorphos.
This is, I think, one of my favorite things that NASA is doing.
So cool.
First of all, it's making contact with an object in space, whether it's a planet or a moon or an asteroid, is just, I don't know, visceral space exploration type thing. Also, it could, if we get good at this, then we can stop being afraid of small meteors hitting the Earth.
I'm worried about the opposite. I'm worried about a Rube Goldbergian domino style effect of poking it, and then it goes off course and accidentally bumps into something else that pushes it into the course.
I'm just going to go with the assumption that although everything is neatly balanced thanks to gravitational forces and masses within our solar system, it's also a messy system, and it is not a static system. And so this little thing, I'm just going to go with this little boop, this impact is not going to have the butterfly effect that.
Most dominoes, when they fall over, don't hit anything else. But every once in a while.
This is why I never make videos of myself doing domino runs, because I set up the dominoes and it's this really pretty pattern, and then I go, let's go. And then like 3 dominoes fall over, and then they don't touch each other anymore.
Well, at least you've got the steady hand to set them up. I can't set up more than 3 without them falling.
At least it doesn't matter if they do fall over, because I'm only knocking over like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. Anyway, cool stuff going on at NASA, and hopefully we will have interesting news about this DART impact by next week's show. But let's talk about Earth for a minute, Justin.
Okay. Every once in a while, you guys sleep, right?
Sometimes.
No. I love sleep.
Usually just after putting head to pillow, closing your eyes, just before drifting off into dreamland, a question might pop into your head. Is my foot the right temperature? Should it be under the blanket, or should I expose it to the cooler air of the room? Should I have gone to the toilet before bed? Is my alarm set for the right time? And how many ants are there on the planet anyway? And while science may not have the answer to every one of those questions, it has come closer to one of them, reported in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 20 quadrillion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the current best estimate of how many ants inhabit planet Earth.
That's too big of a number. That means nothing.
Okay, so now that's fair. The quadrillionth place is not that accessible or relatable to most people. So try this: 20,000 trillion.
Still too big.
Nope, still too big. Not helping.
Okay. I'll shrink it. 20 billion times a million.
No, now you have 2 big numbers. That's not helpful. That's just a lot times a lot.
I'll reduce it even more. 2.5 million ants for every human being on the planet.
See, that
Actually,
one's
it's
better.
more than that.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
it's getting there.
Yeah.
All right. How about 12 megatons of biomass?
Yeah, see, I don't know what that is. That's too big.
Okay, so then it's more than the mass of all of the world's mammals and birds combined in a big ball on a scale.
Yes. See, that one makes sense. Good.
Yet it would probably be a smaller ball, a small ball of writhing ant life.
I don't know how the density of an ant versus that I didn't. I see now. I have more.
See, did they round this to the nearest quadrillion? Because I gotta tell you, every second the number changes.
Well, yes. So it is an estimate.
Yes.
Painted with a broad brush, but compared to previous estimates, it's either twice the number that they thought before by other estimates, or it's 20 times more ants than they thought. To get the new figures, the researchers combed through 12,000-ish reports from databases in multiple languages from around the world across time. They narrowed it down to a mere 489 studies that had rigorous enough methods of collecting and counting ants to be included. And then they extrapolated their number from there. The team was surprised to find how concentrated ants are in the tropics, and that they were being most plentiful there, as well as in savannas and in moist forests. So not too dry. Ants don't like a dry forest as much as they like a moist forest.
Well, in the dry habitats, they're underground.
Well, they might
but the moisture is always very nice.
Yes. So this could still be a massive underestimation. But the point, I think, of this study, though, if you take a moment to reflect on what it means to be an Earthling, it might be the ants that are the dominant species on the planet. Not only are there 2.5 million more of them per every one of us, but their mass alone is greater than all the mammals and birds, apparently. I don't know why they threw the birds in there. That doesn't really feel like it adds a whole lot to the equation, because birds.
It does. There's lots. See,
there's a lot of birds. But
I feel like there's more birds than mammals, which is why you need the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. And in this 20 quadrillion, right? That's 12 megatons. 12 megatons of biomass, and a megaton is 1 million tons. So if you have a 1 ton pickup truck, that's 12 million 1 ton pickup trucks worth of ants.
Of ants.
Yes.
So, I mean, it reminds me of another study from a few years ago where they tried to quantify how many bugs spiders eat. Do you remember that?
A lot, yes.
And it was greater than the weight of all of the whales on the planet. They eat that every year, right? So, like, these social math things are hard to try to explain, but ultimately what we're getting at here is there's a lot of invertebrates, and specifically arthropods. There's just so many.
Yeah.
And as long as and we're safe as long as they don't start working together.
Yeah, exactly.
Ants, not well known for working together. Oh, wait.
Well, not working together with spiders. That's a different situation.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Right.
Blair's nightmares.
Ants.
Speaking of arthropods, arthropods, and insects, right? Insects. We're talking about all of this. Some insects are blood-sucking insects that tend to spread diseases. We don't like those insects as much as other insects, but there are wonderful animals on this planet that eat those blood-sucking insects, and we thank them very much for it. And we celebrate our frogs, and we celebrate our toads and salamanders, and we save them, and we make sure that no funguses kill them ever, like the chytrid fungus. Oh, wait, no, I'm completely wrong here. Like, really, this study that I'm talking about was just published in Environmental Research Letters, has discovered that thanks to the chytrid fungus, which has been traveling around the globe, they linked spikes in malaria cases to die-offs of amphibians in places where the amphibians died. And
There you go.
that were linked with the deadly Batrachotrichium dendrobatiditis. Something like that. Yeah. Bad fungus that kills the amphibians. It spreads thanks to climate change and human movements, and those amphibians die. They're not eating the mosquitoes, which are spreading the malaria, and then you have malaria outbreaks. And so we have to think, I mean, well, duh, everyone, right? It's all connected. It is. And this is just another example.
Well, that's interesting because when I was first learning about conservation education and talking about like why to save the frogs, right? The conversation usually was around the fact that they're indicator species. So their value, amphibians' value is in this kind of view that they are extremely sensitive to changes in water quality. And so if their population drops, they are an indicator that water quality, habitat quality, environmental quality, therefore like potentially human health could be impacted, right? So that was kind of the main reason to save the frogs. This is a much more compelling reason.
But it's still the same story, but it's a very tangible example.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's another kind of feather in my cap of saying like, well, what really is a keystone species? Because
what does that mean? What is an indicator species?
Amphibians are controlling vectors in an area that makes them pretty darn important to humans, but also to other animals. There are other vectors that they're eating of other diseases that impact other animals and plants, probably, that they are controlling. So they have an important job.
Save the amphibians.
Yeah.
Stop the fungal spread.
We need to hire the Dirk Gently Holistic Detective Agency.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we
source out all
do.
These connections.
Are you feeling connected to science? Do you have TWIS to thank for that? Share it with a friend today. Make more connections through science. All right. This is This Week in Science. We're going to come on back with our COVID update. Oh, wait, no. COVID's canceled, everyone. Apparently, President Biden has said that the pandemic is over. So COVID is no more. So we will no longer do this segment of the show.
Wait. Hold on.
What?
In the same sentence, though, didn't he say? What? He said the pandemic was over, but we still got a problem with the COVID. I don't think he knows what a pandemic is.
So, no, he politically does. And what it means is that it's going to roll back funding for all sorts of things like vaccines and public health efforts and
sick leave.
Efforts, sick leave, and so any of the funding.
Response is over, not the pandemic.
Yes, but
now I understand.
It's the same thing. You can just get COVID and be sick, and you just have to pay for it yourself. And yeah, but remember, you have to go get that Omicron booster now.
And a flu shot.
And a flu shot. Yeah. Anyway, yes. And the Omicron booster, the new formulation of the booster does work very well against the Omicron. So I can't wait to get mine whenever I can schedule it.
Folks in the chat room are saying they just got the COVID. Yeah, it's not gone.
It's not gone. People are still. I went to a back to school night tonight, and I was in the very slim minority of people who were wearing masks in the hallways. Not surprising, though. But anyway, the COVID update is over for tonight. We may bring it back depending on the news. But we're going to move right forward right now to another favorite part of the show we love to call Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl, except for
got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. It was such a hard choice picking what to talk to you all about tonight, but I found a couple of great stories. So first, I want to talk to you about octopuses. Octopus arms, they're pretty great. They can operate independently. They still move when they're separated from the body. We think maybe they're neuron clumps in there to the point where they have kind of almost brains in each of their arms. They're crazy. So, knowing that and looking at the way that octopuses move around, you would think that each of those arms have equal footing, if you will, under whether they have any preferences or not about which arms to use in which moments, that it would just be like whichever one is closest, right? When they're moving around, it doesn't appear to have any pattern or favoritism to any particular arm. And so Trevor Wardill, an assistant professor in the College of Biological Sciences at University of Minnesota, wanted to study octopus and other cephalopods and whether they have certain arm preferences over others when hunting. So they studied the California two-spot octopus. They dropped in different types of prey, crabs, shrimp, into tanks, and they recorded video. The octopuses started hiding in ornamental SpongeBob dens, and they had one eye facing outward. They went for the snacks right away. Crabs move slowly, shrimp move fast, so each type of prey also has different hunting tactics in order to catch what they need. They found that octopuses used arms on the same side as the eye viewing the prey. So they did use whichever arm was closest based on what they saw. But no matter what type of prey came by, they always attacked using the second arm from the middle. So they switched which side based on their orientation, but they always used that second arm. When hunting crabs, they pounced on their prey with a cat-like movement, leading with the second arm. And when hunting shrimp, they avoided spooking the prey, so they kind of snuck up. They led with their second arm after they made contact with the shrimp. Then they used neighboring arms 1 and 3 to secure it. So they were shocked. The researchers were shocked at how predictably octopuses used arms to capture prey. So despite the fact that kind of visually it looks kind of to be all over the place, there is a method to how those octopuses have, and they do have, they exhibit favoritism towards certain arms, like handedness. So it seems like the second arm from the middle, it doesn't matter which side, they're ambidextrous about it, but they would rather use their feet than their legs, I guess, is more what it's about. Even though they look morphologically the same, they still have grabbing arms as opposed to other arms that would help out. The thing that I will kind of throw in here is that octopuses have a specialized tentacle called a hexacotylis, which is how the males will actually deliver the sperm packet to the females. So there is specialization in the arms. We know this. So if there is specialization in one of 8 arms, that means they have to, in their little donut brain, figure out which arm is which and use the right arm. So if there is also a right arm, a correct arm, to catch prey with, their donut brain should be able to handle that too.
I love that you're calling them donut brains, but that's not even...
It's not an insult. It's shaped like a donut.
It's shaped like a donut. Yeah, exactly. You donut brain. Well, I'm an octopus, so of course it is.
So then speaking of the donut brain, the next steps for these researchers is they want to study how neurons facilitate arm movements and differentiate arms. So that is going to be pretty interesting. Just they have to make sure not to feed the octopuses anything too big, make sure the octopuses chew, or when they swallow it, they will damage their brain. Because their esophagus goes through their brain. Their donut brain.
That's why they have a donut brain.
Yes.
That's
I love it. I love octopuses so much. So yes, Their
Just
arms. They
swallow
know what's
carefully.
up. They have a favorite arm.
Yeah, like you said, maybe I'd love to know. Yeah, they have their hunting arm. They have their mating arm for males. And do they have other arms for other favorite tasks?
Yeah. Do they have their walking arm? They have their manipulating a shelter arm,
Exactly.
right?
Are any of them good at turning knobs?
All of them, I do believe.
What about a columnar knob, and how many tentacles does it take?
I mean, how
Sorry.
many indeed? Yeah, so moving on from octopuses to, you guessed it, woodlice, desert
Whoa.
isopods.
No, I didn't guess that at all. I had no expectation that woodlice would be thrown at me.
Yeah, they're 2 centimeter long insect things that live in the desert. They look like they're isopods, so they're related to those big bug-looking things that live under the water. Some of them eat a fish's tongue and replace the tongue. We've seen those pictures on the show, right? But anyway, so they look like those, but they're land ones. So I'm sorry to bring that up to all of you unrelated. I apologize. But anyway, let me just bring it back around.
No, you're not.
Okay.
You're not,
So
you're not sorry
desert
at all.
isopods. Desert isopods. Kiki brought up an image. So
these are not tongue replacements.
No.
These are.
But they are related to them. Anyway.
Yes.
Desert
not pill bugs either.
They're not. They look exactly like, I would just think that that's what that was.
Yeah.
They're like insect
they're
armadillos.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they are an interesting species to study for their mating habits. But you weren't expecting that. They mate once in their lifetime. They spend the rest of their life, which is a year, with their chosen mate and their family of 60 to 70 offspring in a single burrow. The females dig the burrow. The males fight to win a particular female and burrow. So they are trying to find the best female and the best space. Both parents take care of the babies, the brood, and all family members, young and old, continue to excavate and clean the burrow. So they keep it nice and large. They expand it as the family grows, and they remove detritus and other, shedded exoskeleton and things that shouldn't be in there. So when the females are choosing where to dig their home, under normal conditions, the largest male will get the largest female. This is a simple case of mate selection. The male's looking for the largest female, the female's looking for the largest male. So usually it's kind of a mutual success thing. Bigger females, bigger males. However, in their natural habitat, scorpions also live. And scorpions are their main predator. And so what researchers from Hebrew University in Jerusalem wanted to look at in the Negev desert is if you give these desert isopods 2 locations, one near an Israeli gold scorpion and one far away from a gold scorpion, what does that do to those mating dynamics? Is it still biggest female, biggest male, great success? Or does it change the dynamic at all because you are changing the value of the burrow? So what they found was that under risk of scorpion predation, there was a size assortive mating, just like in normal, but males that chose and fought over females were on average smaller compared to the females. So it appears as though the bigger males were going, I'm not messing with the scorpion. I'm going to go pick the largest female I can that is the farthest away from a scorpion. So they kind of took care of that, and they had more male-male contests near the safer burrows. So also, just in general, fewer pairs were made in those risky sites. So it really seems like males had to do kind of a cost-benefit analysis, which is something pretty intense for a little desert isopod to do. A little woodlice is doing this kind of detailed, risk calculation to try to figure out which female to go for and which burrow to go for. So smaller males often accepted second best and moved in with smaller females, but they also picked lurking scorpion dens more often. Medium-sized males chose between smaller females in safe places and larger females in risky places, so they kind of got that middle ground. They had to push-pull, and then the largest males got the safest burrows with the largest females. So the males are anticipating future risk of predation. So that is a pretty intense thing for a brain, a little clump of nerve cells to be able to do. But it also means that they weren't just recognizing scorpion, no scorpion. They were understanding the gradation of closeness, of proximity. So it wasn't just safe, unsafe. It's like, this one's closer, but this one has a better female. Is it worth the risk? So they were really making these kind of intense.
Danger or reproduction?
Yeah.
Danger, reproduction. Which one?
Yeah. And so the reason this worked so well as a study, I also thought this was interesting, is that scorpions don't really go off wandering to look for prey. They emerge and attack prey when they are detected by the vibrations that isopods cause when they walk across their burrow roof. So basically, they got to walk right on top of a scorpion to get caught. But the odor of the scorpion does alert isopods. So the isopods also have the mechanics to be able to smell out scorpions and know, oh, this place smells bad. This place smells dangerous. But really, you got to get right on top of them for it to really be dangerous.
So then there's a couple things. One is being less risk averse in your youth. That's a thing that we can see happen across the animal kingdom. Having having learned lessons from the past, perhaps, or getting wisdom with age.
In this case, you get eaten if you get near the scorpions, so you don't reproduce. So only the ones that know to avoid scorpions can reproduce.
Right. So maybe it's a built-in fear aversion, but then it's also based on size though. So it's the longer you've been around, maybe you've seen a scorpion.
So it's not that it's 1 year lifespan. 1 year lifespan. That's a
long time.
One
mating.
single mating experience. There is no repeated experience.
So everything's going to be based on instinct, on just what's in their little brains and neurons to begin with. It's not learned.
But it could be, because if they have that sense of smell, here's the thing. If they have that sense of smell, they not only can smell when there's a scorpion nearby, they can also smell when one of their own has been devoured by that scorpion. And that may be something that the smaller ones haven't experienced yet. And here's the other.
But see, you're associating size with age, and that's not correct.
That's
because
not
they're
correct.
all the same. Yeah. They live a year, and it is a single mating season. This is not
single mating. Not just a single time that they mate, but there's only one time when all of them are born, and then they have the different size, stochastic, different outcomes of size. Okay, then the other one is the risk assessment for a small one. Might be that I put out less vibration when I won't even notice me. There's bigger things.
That's actually, the vibrations is a really interesting point, since that is an indicator for the scorpions. Smaller ones would vibrate the soil a little bit less, but
so maybe they're less. They have a closer range that they can get to a scorpion to get a female. It could be that's why there's
smaller females, smaller females, smaller males, closer to scorpions, because they're not
or bigger females. They can get the better female for the next generation, or the smaller one for the next.
The bigger females are further away from the scorpions because it's less risky.
No, not always. That's the thing, is that they could get a female out of their league, a lice out of their normal league.
The medium-sized males, not the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the smaller ones are ended up close to the scorpions with the little females.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's an equal survival strategy, which is how their size diversity is persisted, because the little ones can put off lesser vibration and be closer to the scorpions, and the big ones have to go further away to live their big lifestyles. Right.
There's one extra piece of this, though, and that is that size is often related to egg clutch, which is part of why the larger females are desired. So
they make another large clutch.
Right. And so just the number of eggs. So that's why part of evolutionary success is linked to the size.
Yeah.
Maybe,
What we
but there's also
do
the small ones.
is get
So
we need to
the
get them away
question
from the
is,
scorpions altogether.
Yes.
well, now what I want to find out is the clutches. Do little ones make smaller woodlice, and do the big ones make big? If two big woodlice have a clutch, it's a larger
How
clutch.
genetically related it is. Yeah.
Are they larger woodlice that are produced? And
That's
if
a good
so, you
question.
have these two strategies that are living side by side. Ones that can be, the small ones get together, the small ones. And then
Here's the only issue with that, though, and I mean we could talk about this all night, but
we're not going to because
but
we have an out.
Yeah. The one issue with that, though, is that when you remove the scorpions from the equation, larger females are better.
Are they? Because
yes.
the large ones.
That's the basis of this study, is that when you look at pure just mate choice,
all of
females.
the males want the larger females.
Who do the small ones prefer?
Larger females. They go as large as they can.
But scorpions involved,
add
they
the
end
scorpion
up with the small ones.
Yeah. They change their preference. They get the largest female they can that is as far away from the scorpion as possible. That is what they are trying to do.
They're trying to weigh these game theory involved in woodlice mating.
Exactly.
That is the take-home point. Yeah. Who knew?
There you go.
Oh, woodlice, you're teaching us about the world we live in. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. If you are really enjoying the show, if you're thinking, I subscribe to this show, I really love this show every single week, how can I help this show out? Well, you can head over to twis.org, click on the Patreon link, and support us monthly through our Patreon community. Choose the amount of your support, $3, $5, $10, whatever you can afford. It all helps. It really does. $10 a month and more, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. We can't do this without you. Thank you for your support. All right, Justin, is it time to bring us to some name calling and then that ancient opium that you brought?
Yeah. Let's see. Where's the humans? We have they have a habit of naming things. I have a name. You have a name. That thing at the end of our shoelaces has a name. It's a convenient for conveyance. It's easy for conversation and memory alike to assign names to things so that we can refer to them later. Biologists, for some awful reason. Oh, is that what it is?
The end of the shoelaces, the egglet. I just remembered.
Yes, I was thinking it the whole time. Wonder if he's gonna say aglet.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I didn't know what it was. I knew it had a name, but I didn't even bother looking it up because I'm like, I literally don't care, and I don't want to know. But now I have that. Thank you.
You do. You're welcome.
Biologists, for some awful reason, at some point decided that Latin was a useful language with which to name things. More officially, binomial nomenclature is the biological system of naming the organisms in which the name is composed of two terms, where the first term indicates the genus and the second term indicates the species of the organism. And actually, it's worked pretty well. A little off-putting to outsiders because maybe it's hard to pronounce some things. Very useful in, say, referencing one type of bat as opposed to one of the other 1,400-ish bat species that are out there. So system works, basically. And so my microbiologists, on the other hand, are doomed because they started down the same path as the plant and animal biologists, using Latin binomial nomenclature to categorize microbial life. Problem is, there isn't enough of an agreed upon naming structure or naming method to keep up with the pace of discovery in the world of DNA sequencing. And I think at some point we just run out of Latin words. don't we? Like, because there are.
We've been making them though. Like there's David Bowie animals.
Yeah.
You just add the Latin suffix on there.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But there's thousands of species of microbes are discovered every time a teapot of seawater is run through a sequencer. Thousands of new versions of existing microbes are being created in labs. So something must be done to the runaway train of needing names. In a paper published in Nature Microbiology, researchers describe Seek Code, a protocol that allows for the naming of newly discovered bacteria and other prokaryotes based only on their DNA sequence. So until now, microbiologists have to follow a protocol outlined in the International Code of Nomenclature and Prokaryotics, ICNP. As part of the process, researchers must succeed in growing the species in isolation in a lab, must submit a type culture of a living or frozen sample of the microbe that will serve as the reference of its identity, and it sends it off to 2 different world repositories. And then they also have to publish a paper with a description of it in a scientific journal for it to officially be named.
And I'm seeing the problems with this already because not all bacteria are amenable to living in a laboratory, and then being preserved as a reference is another. I mean, there's all sorts of steps in there that you can't name them all. So there's a big
and you
blank
just
spot.
said it's happening. They're discovering them too fast, but this involves a peer review process.
Yeah, there's a peer review process. There's a lab process, and meanwhile, the databases of microbes that have been sequenced and are sitting in databases keeps growing exponentially. So, because we have all of these new methods, we're finding samples in the air, in animal guts, of course, in all of the waterways of the world and soils. And so, there's a glut. Thousands and thousands of microbes identifiable only by their DNA are now waiting attempts to culture them for further characterization. Although, as you said, many more they're not even going to try because they don't have anything but the DNA sample of. The team behind Seek Code developed it as a response to some of these issues. Researchers who have deposited and published the DNA sequence of a possible new prokaryote life file an application on a website. No cultures required. System will automatically check to make sure the sequence is unique by going through existing databases. Seek Code will also require that the proposed name follows certain guidelines. The whole David Bowie aspect, right? Making sure it's they must just have people who are like studying Latin at one of these. Like, that's sad. Oh, I found a use for your education. Oh, great. Yeah, you're going to be working at a research lab. That's amazing.
It's a minor. Latin is there's not many people that take Latin as a major, right? Oh, I'm going to get so many letters in Latin.
You're asking for it now.
Even people who can read it and even understand it and speak it don't use it conversationally. And they're usually priests. So, so anyway, they're trying to do all this. This is Jeremy Dodsworth, geomicrobiologist at California State University, San Bernardino. He has tentatively bestowed the name Wolfram E. Raptor Gurlicensis to a species. Okay, so you can kind of make it up as long as it sounds Latin.
No, he's putting things together, and it is making up. I mean, David Bowie, David Attenborough,
making up Latin
kind of. There's making up stuff, but
okay, just add an I at the end of things, and you're fine. So he got this. He got this archaea from hot springs. It relies on tungsten to survive, and has many more species. And from his research group, he plans to enter. he tried to do it. He's doing it through the seek naming system here. Tried to do it the other way, but he has not been able to grow them in complete isolation. So even when he was able to grow it in the lab, it had other things growing with it, and so can't submit it. So you can't get the traditional route name, and this thing would just stay apparently unnamed and unknown to science, I guess. Some microbiologists are refusing to accept the genome as sufficient evidence of a species' existence because the organism is not physically identified and growing in a lab. The thinking is, according to Edward Moore at least, newly discovered but not cultured microbes are simply hypothetical microbes, which now you can see there's this divide between people who have, I have the
bacterial
genetic sequence. I have the genetic code. You described something because it had a flagella and drew a cartoon in a book. That's the old way. The new way is I can actually synthetically probably reproduce this thing one day because I've discovered its genetic code and I've captured that in a database. So there's a little bit of an argument about how to name things or when it qualifies as being named. Actually, Moore though, who's a microbiologist at the University of Gothenburg, favors a numerical classification system. But where do you even start that? Where do you start or end that? How do you begin assigning numbers to
You're number one. You're number two. Everyone, raise your hands, and when we call your number, put your hand down.
I mean, it's just going to be the same as the words, right? I mean, different sequences are going to mean different things. So, all the bacteria that start with 1, 2, 3 are going to be related, right? So then,
we're humans. We're going to end up putting a name to it anyway.
Yes.
And then, hey, I'm number 2, which is David Bowie, Blair, whatever. And that one, oh, by the way, there's 8,000 versions of me.
But so this is what happened, the confusion that started to happen and became apparent during the diversification of the COVID-19 lineage, where we started with the alpha. And, we didn't used to call it the alpha, the beta, the gamma. That came later. It was just SARS-CoV-2. It was just SARS-CoV-2, and that was it. But what the geneticists started doing is they started seeing all of these mutations and diversifications, and so they started tagging them, and they were given numbers. Yes. They're given like letters and numbers to represent aspects of the mutations that are taking place, and those letters and numbers have been complicated for people. So then they came up and they said, we need to, instead of saying B14.1 blah 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 blah, we need to call it alpha, beta, gamma, omicron. But even once we started doing that, it's omicron 1, 2, 2.5, 5. I mean, suddenly it's just we're getting into a name and numbers. So it's a complicated question, and so regardless.
So that's where we're going to be for right now. Right now, we are having the emergence of 2 different naming systems, which could be a stopgap to a universal, or maybe even a third with a numbering system. Could be the stopgap to the, or it could just end up in future chaos. But I want to point this because this is still nothing compared to the train wreck that is going on in the gene naming side of things. As many genes have actually several names or numbers assigned to them already, as they were discovered many different times without a central database.
Yeah.
In different labs, different iterations of genes that do have sometimes numerical systems attached to them of slight variations on those genes. But at the end, humans will want to have a name on a thing, like you say, so that we can talk about it in any kind of context of conveyance. Because if you throw numbers at people, it's not going to be very relatable. My last story of the night is loading right now. So this is a new study out of Tel Aviv University, which I believe is in Israel. They've discovered the world's earliest known evidence of opium usage. Opium residue was found in ceramic vessels discovered in an excavation at a construction site back in 2012. Hundreds of Canaanites graves. Canaanites was just being ancient indigenous people to the area. Hundreds of these graves from the 18th to the 13th centuries BC have been unearthed at the site. The vessels that contain the opium are about 3,400 years old. And they were found in graves, apparently having been used in local burial rituals. A number of indigenous graves from the late Bronze Age were found in the excavation and led them to these offerings that were apparently intended to accompany them into the afterlife. What was also interesting, among the pottery, a large group of vessels made in Cyprus, not even from the area, stood out because they kind of were similar to the shape of the poppy flower. And the hypothesis had already arose back in the 19th century that these types of vessels were used for opium, but nobody had any proof of it. Now, an organic residue analysis has revealed opium residue in 8 vessels, some local and some made in Cyprus, making it the earliest known evidence of the use of hallucinogens in the world. This is Vanessa Linares of Tel Aviv University explaining, this is the only psychoactive drug that has been found in the Levant in the Bronze Age. In 2020, researchers discovered cannabis residue on an altar in Tel Arad, but this dated back to the Iron Age, hundreds and hundreds of years after the opium in Tel Yehud, where this finding took place. Because the opium was found at a burial site, it offers a rare glimpse into the burial customs of the ancient world. Of course, we do not know what the opium's role was in the ceremony. Whether it was the Canaanites in Yehud believed that the dead would need opium in the afterlife, because it might be a long journey, or whether it was the priests who consumed the drug for the purposes of the ceremony, maybe gave it to the mourners. Moreover, the discovery sheds light on the opium trade in general. One must remember that opium is produced from poppies, which don't grow there, right? They grow in Asia Minor. So that is the territory current day Turkey, whereas the pottery, which we identified, the opium was made in Cyprus. In other words, opium was brought to Yehud from Turkey through Cyprus, although I suppose they could have ended up in the vessels after too. So some great importance was being put to this drug that was then used in a burial ceremony partway around the world. Really interesting. They have no written sources to describe the use of narcotics in burial ceremonies, so they can only speculate as to why it was part of it, why it was there, why this thing of great enough importance to, it's 3,400 years ago wasn't really to have a trade over great distances like that. It's just really fascinating.
I mean, yeah, those are huge distances, and it's interesting to see the direction that things potentially were flowing. I mean, I think it's still circumstantial evidence in terms of connecting Turkey and Cyprus and all of these places, but at the same time, in the story that they're specifically telling, but it is a good story, and it tells not just a story of this drug that has been used for pain relief, for relaxation, because of addiction, has been used for ceremonial uses, has been used for so many reasons throughout our history for thousands of years, and it's giving some really interesting insights. Let's dig up more graves,
and likely just because again, this is 3,400 years ago. It means in Turkey, it was, even though we don't have documentation of, I guess it's the oldest it's the oldest in the world evidence that they're saying. But it must predate that, because if it's being grown and exported from Turkey, it's probably been there for a much longer time.
Yep.
Although we're not, this is not necessarily drug usage as we do it in our pharmaceutical grade, mass production, addiction riddled world of today. these sorts of things. This was a crop that was grown that didn't have a food usage. So it could only have been really utilized for this purpose. And it looks like it was used ceremonially, not recreationally. At least by the Canaanites or whoever the indigenous people were there 3,400 years ago.
Let's tell that story. We don't know. We weren't there until we have other evidence. That's the way that it looks. I've got a couple stories for the end of the show here. Let's schmooze, everyone. Let's talk about schmooze. Schmooze is a newly discovered small protein, which is part of a family of proteins, a type of protein. It's tiny. It's called a microprotein. They are much, much smaller than normally studied proteins. And historically, proteins that have been studied, there have been like 20,000 of them or so, and they're just big. They're the proteins that researchers can see and have been paying attention to. And more recently, these microproteins have gained a lot of interest, along with stuff that's RNA sized, little tiny proteins that can slip in between the cracks in our cells that can maybe diffuse a little bit more easily across membranes and get places and take care of jobs that they might have that we've ignored for so long. So schmooze is part of this family of microproteins. It's approximately the size of the insulin peptide, and it can be very easily administered. And it has been discovered, as just reported in Molecular Psychiatry, that the schmooze protein is encoded by a newly discovered gene within the mitochondria. That's the part of the cell that is responsible for producing the energy, the ATP that your cell uses for its metabolism. And it is also associated with some 20 to 50% higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. And nearly a quarter of people of European ancestry have a mutated version of this protein. Quarter of people of European ancestry. And so have this protein mutated, conferring 20 to 50% higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. So the interesting part here is that historically, and I think we talked about it on the show a while ago, there's been one direction that's been pushed in Alzheimer's research for many years. And it came out in the beginning of the summer that a lot of research is now being questioned with respect to its validity and the pathway of Alzheimer's research. And there have been a group of people quietly working in the background saying, well, maybe it's not these amyloid plaques, and maybe it doesn't work exactly. We're not seeing these things work the same way, and maybe there's other pathways. And so some people are saying, hey, maybe Alzheimer's is an immune system dysfunction. Maybe it's something going wrong with the brain's immune system, leading it to mischaracterize markers on cells and attack. There are other researchers going down this route of looking at mitochondrial dysfunction. And so this is where this particular schmooze protein comes into the story, is that it being within the mitochondria, it opens up kind of new directions for addressing potentially Alzheimer's disease and more broadly mitochondrial function.
Super important too, because as we discussed a couple weeks ago, the initial amyloid plaque research that set us down this path and looking at it from this one perspective is unreproducible.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, I think it's like all the pathways.
Probably
what are we doing?
The worst thing that has ever happened. The worst research ever.
Boondoggle.
Fake research.
I mean, I was taught that like it was
ever.
Like it was gospel in school, talking about the plaques. That was all what it was about.
Billions of dollars pursuing this, and countless brilliant minds
and
over something that was not
Yeah, countless minds
Good
working
stuff.
on that, but many minds sitting back and looking at the data going, there's something wrong here. And so thankfully, there have been people working in parallel on different directions,
If they can
potentially
get the
getting
grants.
funding. Yeah,
If they
getting
can.
funding
That's
through
been the thing.
other
Yeah.
pathways. But
Mhm.
this particular study, it's interesting also because they used modern techniques of big data. They identified genetic variations in mitochondrial DNA that were associated with Alzheimer's risk, and then they were able to discover the mutated gene code for the microprotein, and then start looking at how the gene was encoded into various the microprotein forms, and how that changed things. And they've done cell culture and animal experiments showing changes in energy metabolism based on schmooze levels and where schmooze is living inside the mitochondria in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So it's a really, number one, could be very impactful just for Alzheimer's. But number two, this particular path of looking into microproteins is a huge, huge research area because these little proteins are relatively unstudied as yet.
Yeah. And
So there's a lot
unnamed,
more.
which is a
And
whole other.
and unnamed.
So, like, this has
Come
got
back.
a great name, schmooze. They forget the Latin thing
Yeah.
altogether. They got schmooze, but now we got to come up with 180,000 other names in this system. Oh gosh.
So many names to come up with. My final story for the night is about moss, of moss and humans. And you might think that this is a story about ecology and how we interact with the environment. But no, it is a story about how researchers published their work in nucleic acids research on how they took gene mutation machinery from moss and put it into human cells. So they took moss genes, making moss proteins, or put them in human cells, and then check to see what would happen. Well, normally in the moss cell, this mutation or error correction machinery in these little plant cells, it is active on 2 points, and it's only active fixing the RNA transcript. So it's kind of like you've got a printing press, right? And the error is in the plates for that printing press. So you print the book and then you go, oh, we got it wrong. And you go in and you correct the pages that have been printed after the fact. That's kind of what this error correction machinery does in moss. Anyway, they said, oh, let's see what happens. This is this evolutionary machinery. They don't have very many errors. It's awesome. Human cells, we've got all these errors all the time. We've got cancers. We've got all sorts of problems because we got all these mutations and errors, and we don't fix the problems as much as we should. So let's see what happens. They expected that it would just dive into the human cell and change the RNA. But that's not what it did in the same way. What they found is that this moss error editing machines, PPR56 and PPR65, which only act in the mitochondria, also in moss, introduce nucleotide changes in RNA transcripts of the cell nucleus in human cells and are active at over 900 points in the human cell targets, as opposed to the 2 where it's active in moss. And so they did not expect this at all. And so this moss problem-solving machinery is working differently in human cells, and they don't really know why. So
isn't moss is moss something that can become a symbiont in other things?
It can, yes.
Okay.
Well, not some species, yes.
Right. Maybe this is one of them.
It could be.
Maybe
yeah.
this is like, okay, we have a whole plan for this because this is how we've done stuff in the past. somewhere in our genomic code. Although I have to say, my biggest takeaway from this study is how well you resisted making the of moss and men.
I thought about it. Of moss and men. Yes. Oh, that's a good one too. Mm-hmm. No. No.
Well, go ahead and moss me up. Make me moss woman. Correct my genetic mistakes. I'm down.
So they've just done this in cells, but the question is, we have evolved on land, and our error correction in human cells, it's not great. I mean, we have a lot. It keeps down a lot of mutations for sure, but there are mutations in all of our cells constantly. Every cell that divides is a new opportunity for more mutations to arise within our genome, within those cells as we are living. And it would be great if we could solve that problem. We could reduce cancers. We could increase health. We could potentially lead to longer lives. These are all sorts of benefits that would come from improving the error correction of our gene copying. So let's see what happens. We'll have the Moss Men future. Maybe Moss Men will go live on another planet.
I would just need to take frequent baths. Need to dunk myself, keep myself nice and moist.
That's right. You could hang out with the ants in the moist forest.
Yes.
Blair in the mossy forest. That does it for me, for my stories. Do we have anything else tonight?
Just our good nights.
Just our good nights. And I do hope
we gotta go.
I do hope it is a good night for all. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. Time for some shout outs for the science friends. We do appreciate our science friends out there. All of you who are watching live, thank you so much for being here. But also, thank you to Fada for helping with show notes and social media. Thank you to Identity4 for recording the show. Gord, Arnlore, and others who help keep our chat rooms very safe and happy. Thank you for your help doing that. And thank you, Rachel, for editing. We always try and make your job interesting. And thank you to our Patreon sponsors, without whom we would have a very hard time doing this show. Thank you to Teresa Smith, James Schaefer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velasarb, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tozzi, Woody MS, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vegard Shefstad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Gaurav Sharma, Ragan, Derek Schmidt, Don Mundus, Stephen Albaran, Daryl, My Shack, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fredis104, Sky Luke, Paul Runovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack Bryan, Carrington, David Eden Youngblood, Matt Base, Vote Beto for Texas, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Dana Pearson, Richard, Brenton Minish, Johnny Gridley, Clemmy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramos, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Nappy, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, Tony Steele, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your help.
I think that's longer than the last time I heard it. Thanks, new patrons.
Thank you. And if you would like your name read at the end of the show, you can head over to twis.org and click on that Patreon link. On next week's show, we are going to be joined by the Skeptics Guide to the Universe is Steve Novella, who's going to be talking about their new book on the future.
Oh, good. There's going to be one. Oh, yes. I was starting to worry.
With or without us, there'll be
one. You could be skeptical about the future. Or we could talk to Dr. Novella. But anyway, we will be talking with Dr. Novella next week. At what time, Justin?
8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and our Facebook channels. And as always, from twis.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? Perhaps I'll use Soak in the Tub since you're already part moss. Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter.
Yes. You can also contact us directly. Email Kirsten at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistmeanin@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into my modem. And apparently that means that it'll be gone forever.
It's bad news.
You can also ping us on the Twitter,
Bing.
where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head. Wait, am I going to get the right one?
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy.
Ha!
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 Ha! Ha! What are we doing? My cats are crawling around here like this room is their jungle gym.
It is. It's Jungle Gym o'clock.
Jungle Gym o'clock. It's Kitty Zoomie time. Kitty Zoomie time. Jungle Gym o'clock. It's Kitty Zoomie time. Yes.
Yeah.
The cats are on the prowl. The cats are on the prowl. Meow, meow, meow. Okay, that's enough of me.
Kitty cat time. It's Kiki kitty cat time.
Kitty cat time. That's right. Blair, we're so glad that your internet worked. You were here for the whole show.
So just so you know, I currently have my show notes and my stories open in Safari, but StreamYard doesn't work in Safari, so I had to open Chrome for StreamYard. So Chrome was not loading it, like nothing. I could load nothing in Chrome. The internet would say I had 300 Mbps, and then all of a sudden it would go, your internet's gone. And it did that every couple of minutes. It would be there long enough for me to load a story. I'd go to scroll, and then it would break. It would go, nope, I can't read that anymore. So
why?
Thanks. So Xfinity did not list any outages, but a third-party site said there was an outage in my area code. So like, I think there obviously was something. There was a struggle happening. Right. Maybe everyone's watching Andor because that came out today. I don't know. 3 episodes.
3 episodes?
Yeah, they dropped 3 at once. I have not seen any of them. No spoilers. Thank you, internet. I will see them tomorrow.
Triple premiere. Oh, that's totally what it is. The entire Bay Area is just watching.
Yeah.
It's just watching Andor. For
Perhaps.
all of you who are here with us this evening, I just want to say thank you for watching TWIS instead of
before, after,
before.
doesn't matter.
You
What are we
chose
talking-
us now. Thank
Wait,
you.
what are we competing with? What's going on?
Andor.
What's
I
that?
mean, with Blair on the show, I think we really do fit within the Star Wars universe.
There you go.
There we
I
go.
mean,
Star
I
Wars
got
thing?
I got 2 helmets. Yeah.
It's all good. Blair, do you
Yes.
need to run away?
I do. I
Yeah.
have to run away. I'll be here next week, internet permitting. If it's not one thing, it's another, huh?
Well, just make sure that we all sacrifice some hummus and pita to the internet gods.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. I sacrificed
This
some
one-
matzo ball soup to the internet gods earlier tonight, but that was not sufficient, I guess. All right. Well, I'll see you both
Okay.
next week. Happy to be back. Missed you last week. Enjoyed watching. That was a wild experience. Trolling you in the YouTube chat room.
I know. I saw your comments. I'm like, oh, Blair.
Hey.
I tried to bring you into the show as much as I could.
Yeah, no, I saw.
All right. Well, say good night, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Justin.
And I don't know, Kiki, are you saying good night? I don't know. Are you guys? Yeah. All right. Good night, Kiki.
Good night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Be safe. Stay safe. Stay healthy, right? And stay curious. Let's keep waving all night.